Well, happy Wednesday, everybody. Good to see you. I'm Doug Johnson. I'm the executive director of the nonprofit California Invasive Plant Council, aka CALIPSI. And we are here today for the Wednesday edition of this year's Invasive Lunch webinar series, put on in collaboration between CALIPSI and our partners at the University of California Division of Agricultural and Natural Resources. So I'd like to kick off today by welcoming you all. Thank you for filling out the poll. We'll look at the results of that in just a moment. And just mentioning a couple logistics, we'll use the Q&A function on Zoom for your questions for our speaker today. And we'll use the chat for chatting, and also for any technical questions or challenges you're having, just put it in there. And we have folks monitoring both the Q&A and the chat. So quick introductions. The California Invasive Plant Council is a statewide nonprofit organization. We're a membership organization. Our members comprise mostly land managers, but researchers and volunteers as well. We have an annual conference every October. This year's is our 30th. We have a lot of resources on our website about invasive plants at calipsy.org, so take a look there. Elliot, do you want to jump on and give a quick synopsis of ANR?
Yes, thank you, Doug. Welcome, everyone. My name is Elliot. I am a UC Community Education Specialist based down in Southern California. I am coming to you today from Tongva, Kitchland. The Cooperative Extension and UC serve to take whatever research and education going on in the universities and bring that to the community. We have a whole bunch of different programs that are really integrated into the community from the different universities. We have sites all over California. And a shameless plug for my programs, the California Naturalist and the UC Climate Stewards UC Climate Stewards programs as well. So welcome to any naturalists and climate stewards that are on the call. Thank you, Doug.
Sure thing. Thanks for that description. And yeah, if you want to become a climate steward or a California naturalist, the program, just look it up online and you can become one. All right, well, let's give a quick background on California Invasive Species Action Week. That's why we're doing this webinar series this week. This is I believe, legislatively mandated week, the second week of June each year, when the California Department of Fish and Wildlife organizes the week, where they post on their website all sorts of events that are happening across the state where you can get involved to volunteer. They run a youth art contest to help with education, K through 12. So I believe this is the 6th year of the event. It's modeled after other events that go on across the country in other states, and also the national event that happens both in February each year and now also in July. So the lunchtime talks this week, we've had 2 so far. One, Ted Grossholtz on invasive crabs and community science for both managing and monitoring crab populations. Yesterday's talk from Andrea Williams and Joey Algiers from the Park Service and the Native Plant Society on weeds that come in after wildfires and how community scientists can help track that. Today's talk on community science at Lake Tahoe. We'll introduce Emily in a moment. Tomorrow, Beatrice on how people can help protect our trees from invasive pests like shot hole borers. And finally, on Friday, the Invasive Spartina Project in San Francisco Bay that has been working for over 15 years to eradicate invasive cordgrass from mudflat and tidal marsh habitat will be sharing some of the lessons learned from their efforts. It's a really exciting project. So all of those can be found where you presumably found this event. Just Google Invasive Lunch, and there is a website on the University of California's, a page on University of California's website that lists all these talks and how to register. And I believe it just got pasted in the chat as well. Thank you, Claire. Whoop. So let's take a quick look at your answers to the poll questions. Oh, looks like NorCal edged out SoCal today, and we have some folks from other states Maybe you've already told us in the chat, but if not, go ahead and type it in the chat and let us know. Looks like one person. I think we had someone from Colorado yesterday. How familiar are you with the invasive species issue? Looks like a typo in there. Somewhat familiar in the middle. So that's great. This is meant to, these webinars are meant to increase awareness of various kinds of invasive species issues across California. And have you been to Tahoe? Wow. Almost 2/3 have been to Tahoe in both summer and winter. And 20% are still waiting to get there. Highly recommended, a beautiful place. All right, well, thanks for taking the poll. I am going to, Emily, if you want to share your screen, I will stop mine. I'd like to introduce our speaker today. I'm really excited to have Emily Frey, who is the Citizen Science Program Coordinator for the League to Save Lake Tahoe. She supports the League's extensive network of volunteers and oversees their community science programs and events like Pipe Keepers, Eyes on the Lake, and Snapshot Day. Emily has also worked in the Tahoe region for the Tahoe RCD, Resource Conservation District, the Tahoe Environmental Research Center, and California State Parks in the Tahoe Basin. So without further ado, Emily, take it away.
Thanks so much, Doug, and thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be talking a little bit about the eisenlight program and what we have going on here at Lake Tahoe. So yes, my name is Emily Frey. I am the Citizen Science Program Coordinator, and I run a couple different citizen science programs, community science programs here at Lake Tahoe, including eisenlight. This is one we're going to be focusing on in our chat today. So for those of you that have not been to Lake Tahoe, and for those of you that have, this is a beautiful picture, a great snapshot of the lake. And this is kind of what it's known for best, is this beautiful blueness, immense views from almost anywhere in the lake. It's a very popular tourist destination for wintertime skiing, snowboarding, as well as summertime hiking and getting out on the water in boats and things like that. And yeah, it's just beautiful. So I highly recommend visiting if you haven't. And despite its beauty, there are some threats lurking beneath the surface. And these threats can cause habitat degradation, clarity loss, and more. And specifically, the threat that we're worried about and going to be focusing on today is aquatic invasive species. We do have a few in Lake Tahoe that are known, and one of those is Eurasian water milfoil and curly-leaf pondweed. These are the two aquatic invasive plants that we have in Lake Tahoe. We also have warm water fish like giant goldfish, as you see here in the photo. This was taken out of Lake Tahoe. We have other warm water fish like largemouth and smallmouth bass, catfish, and more. And we have Asian clams as well. You can see a bed of dead Asian clams here with some algae on top. So why are we worried about Asian clams? What's the concern, or sorry, about aquatic invasive plants in Lake Tahoe? What's the concern? What can they do to the water quality as we know it? Well, they can take over shallow areas. They can grow very dense, very matted, very tangled, and they can kind of slough up onto the shore in the fall time when they start to die off for the season. And both of these pictures kind of depict how they can really degrade recreation. They make swimming, walking through this, paddling through this a lot less fun, a lot less beautiful. It does not look or maybe smell or feel like the normal Tahoe that we're used to. They can also affect recreation further out into the lake. So if you're a boater, they can get caught in the propellers. They can get caught on your anchor. You can end up dragging them further out into the lake and causing a lot more issues there. And the bottom line is that they make Tahoe a lot less blue. They can actually affect the water chemistry and the water quality. They can add more nutrients to the water, more fine sediment particles. They can decrease the clarity, as you can see in these side-by-side photos. They can add more muck and more clay kind of sediment to the bottom, which is a lot less fun to walk on as a swimmer or a wader than our normal natural sandy granitic bottom that we know as Lake Tahoe. And we are Keep Tahoe Blue. We want to keep Tahoe blue. So these plants are one of our many challenges in keeping Tahoe blue here. So where in the lake can we find these invasive plants? This is a great map that was provided by the Tahoe Resource Conservation District. It was created in 2019, so it is a little out of date. But you can see all these dots here represent either known or past infestations of aquatic invasive plants. The white dots are past infestations, so they are now in the surveillance and monitoring phase. So they've been controlled and we're just checking to make sure they're not coming back in those areas. The dark green are active sites that were either slated for control in 2019 or were currently under control. And actually, I believe all of these sites are still in the control process. It doesn't, unfortunately, take just one season to get rid of them in an area. And then the lighter green are futures plant control sites. Some of those are currently underway as we speak, and some are slated for future years of control. But these are kind of the areas that we know of in Lake Tahoe. Of course, there's always the possibility of new infestations and new introductions. And where in the lake can these spread? So if you can kind of see on this map, around the edges, there's some cross-hatching. And this area represents sites that have very warm water, very shallow water, areas that are protected from wind and waves. So things like marinas, man-made marinas especially, are tend to kind of encompass all of those things that are on the screen, or rock cribs, bays. You can see Emerald Bay down on the bottom left here is entirely covered in this ideal habitat. They also really like silty or muddy substrates. It's a lot easier for the roots to get down in there versus sand or, of course, rock or boulders. And then 35 feet deep or less. So they are still plants. They do still need to photosynthesize, meaning they do still need to be able to reach sunlight. And they will reach up towards the surface as much as possible. They'll grow really tall to get closer to that sunlight and get as much sunlight as they can. How do they spread? Well, primarily they're spread by humans. We believe that they were first introduced by boaters at the round of the turn of the century. They, again, can get caught on anchors and propellers and be dragged all around the lake. But that's not all. Unfortunately, these plants are really good at propagating themselves. The two invasive plants that we have, curly-leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil, have special ways to actually spread and create new populations from just a small little piece of themselves. So curly-leaf pondweed is shown in the center here, actually creates something called a turion, which is essentially a little clone of itself. It grows these all along the plant stalk. It drops them off towards the end of the growing season. They just sink down and stay in the sandbank for seasons to come until the conditions are right. And then they'll sprout an entirely new plant from that. And it's very effective. And it makes controlling them for good a very difficult and challenging process, because you can get rid of all the plants one season and all these turions are going to sprout a next season. And there could be deeper and deeper turions. So it is a very long-term control and monitoring process to get rid of curly-leaf pondweed. Eurasian water milfoil has a different method. It actually can sprout entirely new root systems from just a small fragment. If you are familiar with botany terms, the space where leaves meet the stem is called the node. And there's a lot of things going on in that little space, that node area. And the ability to grow roots is one of the things going on there. So you can have a very small piece of Eurasian water milfoil floating around, and it can actually grow new roots from it. You can see the roots here. I've kind of circled with a little red circle. These little white thread-like things coming off of it are roots. So what happens is at the end of the growing season, Eurasian water milfoil will start to break apart naturally. These fragments will float away, potentially be caught by a propeller, potentially be caught in the currents of natural currents of Lake Tahoe, and be brought to a new area. The roots will start to sprout, it'll sink down to the bottom and actually sprout and root into the sand there or the muck there, depending on if the conditions are right. And it can create an entirely new infestation there. So that's why it's so important to be constantly checking areas that are busy with recreation and just areas all around the lake for new potential infestations. Now, we do have some effective control methods currently in use at Lake Tahoe to actually get rid of them, including one called Laminar flow aeration. And we've got this great little graphic here. Hopefully it's playing on your screens. Essentially, I'll play it a couple times because it's very short. Essentially, laminar flow aeration is actually working to reduce the muck layer on the bottom that is so ideal for these plants to grow in. They like the muck layer. It has a lot of nutrients. It's very easy to get their roots down into. And so then the plants can actually thrive in those locations where the muck layer is very deep. So we want to remove the muck layer, therefore removing the habitat. And we do that by installing a device at the bottom of the lake area where these plants are growing that actually introduces oxygen to the water column. And this kickstarts some bacteria that are in that muck layer. They consume that oxygen and break down the muck layer, therefore reducing that ideal habitat, that ideal sediment. So you can see the muck layer is that deeper part. It's going away and our water clarity is coming back and our plants are getting smaller. Obviously, this is kind of ideal animation here, but it is very effective, and it's been effective in certain areas around the lake, and it's still being used in new areas and tested in new areas. All right. We also use something called a bubble curtain. This is a really exciting tool that has been used in a few different areas in the lake to basically stop the flow of Eurasian water milfoil and other fragments from one area to another. So specifically, this photo is showing the Tahoe Keys, and inside the Tahoe Keys, which is kind of the foreground of the photo where the boat is coming from, is a very dense, expansive infestation of aquatic invasive plants. And we don't want those plants to be spreading out into the lake proper, which is kind of this background area. It's a very hazy photo, so it's kind of hard to tell. But we don't want to add any fragments to those areas where they can potentially spread to new and create new infestations. So this bubble curtain actually stops those fragments from flowing out into the lake. The fragments will approach the bubble curtain. Let's see, I can even get a little laser. So they'll approach the bubble curtain. They will reach this line of bubbles, and it literally is just a line of bubbles shot out from a hose along the bottom of the lake. And they'll be directed using this kind of V formation. They'll be directed to the edge here of this channel. Well, they'll collect along the channel, and there's actually something called a sea bin waiting there for them, which is basically a sort of kind of water vacuum or Roomba, if you will, but it doesn't move around. It just is waiting there for things to come into it. And it will collect all those fragments so it can be properly disposed of and removed from the lake and not be spreading out into Lake Tahoe. And this bubble curtain is now being used in not only the Keys, but it's being used in another private marina this year to actually keep infestations from coming into the marina. So it can kind of be used in the opposite form that it's currently used in this photo. Really exciting though, just to control the spread of invasive plants. And then kind of tried and true method for removing and controlling plants is bottom barriers. So if you're familiar with like solarization of terrestrial plants, it's the same concept. We're basically placing large, thick black mats down onto the lake bottom where there's plants growing underneath, secured with metal rebar and left in for a season. They can be reinstalled season after season as needed, but they're generally not left in over the winter. And it actually just blocks off that sunlight access for these plants. It blocks off some of the gas exchange as well that they need. And it is very effective in removing dense and large areas of plants. And we also use diver assisted suction removal. So in areas where there is maybe not as dense of plants, it's a lot more sparse, or it's a mixture of native and invasive plants, and we don't want to just kill off all of the native plants. Divers will actually go down and hand pull these plants and feed the fragments into a suction tool, another underwater vacuum, which you can kind of see the tubing for in this photo. And it brings those plant fragments up onto a boat topside, where again, they can be disposed of properly and safely. And then another really exciting new tool is this UV light boat. So this kind of pontoon boat has a light array attached to the bottom that only emits UVC light, which the plants don't love that much. It's really not good for them. And so they lower this light array down onto them for a few minutes at a time. And it actually causes the plant cells to basically start to break down and degrade. And it's very effective. The plants have shown to be, so it only takes about 2 minutes for the light to be exposed to them. And then it takes about 2 weeks after that for them to really start degrading and breaking down. So it's very effective. And it's a great opportunity, a great alternative tool that requires a little bit less manpower, less getting in the water. So a lot of great tools in use at Lake Tahoe. And again, they're very effective, very useful, However, only when we can actually get them implemented. For those of you that are very familiar with Lake Tahoe, you may know how complex it is. Lake Tahoe has 2 states that have claim to Lake Tahoe. There's 5 counties. There's 1 city and a myriad of other land managers and stakeholders that all have a say in what happens at Lake Tahoe in certain areas. And it makes it very difficult. This complexity makes it very difficult to solve these challenges that are facing Lake Tahoe. Every jurisdiction has their own mandates and their own procedures, and aquatic invasive plants, they don't care about these boundary lines. They're gonna float wherever they want. They're gonna root and spread wherever they think is best. So it makes it really difficult sometimes to actually properly remove these plant infestations in areas that potentially cross boundary lines. So the answer is a public-private partnership. Say that 5 times fast. And as a kind of answer to that is the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program. So this is a program that gets all of those stakeholders together as a group to discuss these challenges and solve them in different ways. And Keep Tahoe Blue comes in because we are a nonprofit organization. We're privately funded. We are able to mobilize our community to take action and contribute valuable data across those boundary lines. And as a subsection of this Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program is the Invasive Species Program. So the EIP actually focuses on a lot of different issues, but the Invasive Species Program has continued to be a top priority within this program. So, and as part of the Invasive Species Program, this Aquatic Invasive Species Action Agenda was written to help prioritize and direct our work for the next 9 years, revolving around control and prevention and mitigation of aquatic invasive species. And just some fun statistics for you if you're into money numbers. From 2010 to 2020, the Aquatic Invasive Species EIP kind of subsect has received 26 million for the work that we're doing around AIS. And 5.9 million of that was from private sources. Now, remember, Keep Tahoe Blue is a nonprofit organization, so we actually don't receive any of the public money, but we do receive a lot of private funding to help our work, and we are very involved in the Aquatic Invasive Species Program. So everything that we do as an entire group at Lake Tahoe is backed by science. We approach the issues from all sides. We call it like a 3-pronged approach. So we've got prevention, just keeping new invasive species out of the lake, keeping invasive species from spreading in the lake. And so far, we've got some exciting stats this year. In 2021, the inspection program, which, if you're not familiar, any motorized or trailered boat that would like to launch into Lake Tahoe actually has to get an inspection done first, and potentially a decontamination if there's anything that is found on board that's of concern. So the program season starts in May, and they've already found 14 boats that are considered contaminated. They are carrying an invasive species of some sort. Half of those, 7, are carrying mussels. So Lake Tahoe does not have quagga mussels or zebra mussels. We hope to never have them, but 7 boats have already come to an inspection station with those mussels on board. In 2020, as a comparison, 20 total boats were found with mussels. So we've already found 7 in 2021 in just a month or 2. And in 2020, there was only 20 boats with mussels. So kind of scary statistics. We've got a lot of threats coming at us from a lot of different areas. And this program is really effective at keeping those invasive species out of Lake Tahoe. We also have control. I talked a lot about the control methods that are currently being used in Lake Tahoe, and control is still happening. There's a lot of control projects going on as we speak. And again, it's very effective. You can see this before and after photo in the center bottom here. This is actually in Emerald Bay back in 2008 to 2011, I believe, where there was an extensive aquatic invasive plant infestation treated in that area. And you can see how beautiful and clear it looks in the after photo. So it really does make a huge difference to get these plants out of our lake. And then, of course, monitoring. We can't control the populations unless we know where they are. So monitoring is a very, very important part, a very integral part of being effective within the aquatic invasive species challenge. And that's where the Eyes on the Lake program comes in. So Eyes on the Lake, our kind of tagline is protect while you play. We train community members and encourage them to report what they're seeing, whether it's presence of aquatic plants or absence, while they're out recreating at the lake. This helps us find and track new infestations, helps us track spread of infestations, and ultimately we can perform an early detection rapid response within that detection there. So if we can find new infestations while they're still small, it's a lot easier to control, it's a lot faster to control, and it's a lot less expensive to control. And this program started in 2013, and from about 2013 to 2018, our data submitted by volunteers was pretty much the only data that existed for aquatic invasive plants in Lake Tahoe. In 2018, there was a lake-wide underwater survey that covered the entire nearshore and is really helpful to understand, for us to understand where the populations are. But before that, until that survey was done, it was just our data being used. So I mentioned that we train the community. We do conduct free full trainings on plant identification. We bring plant samples to the trainings in little Tupperwares you can see here, so that they have kind of a controlled setting to practice their identification skills and learn about how to identify not only the invasives, but also our native plants, because we do have a variety of native plants and they're in the same families as our invasives, so they can be really difficult to differentiate sometimes. We also go out as a group in the trainings to the water to identify flat fragments that are floating around, and oftentimes we see clumps of plants, and so it's kind of a fun challenge to pick up a clump of plants and try to get our group to identify it using their new skills and their new identification guide. And with COVID, of course, we have moved trainings to a Zoom platform. We're currently working on offering both digital, virtual, and in-person trainings, because there's kind of a benefit to both, to having both. And we're working on also incorporating more digital resources to this program to ensure that the program is accessible to anybody that wants to join, whether they have time to attend a training or not. So every person that attends a full training is provided with an Eyes on the Lake handbook that kind of summarizes the program, the training procedures within the program. And they're also provided with an aquatic plant ID guide. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a peek into the ID guide for those of you that would like to create a similar program. This ID guide is very helpful for a customized aquatic plant kind of categorized helpful resource for volunteers to use while they're in the field. And so when you're flipping through the ID guide, we have kind of a front page and a back page. And we've got all of the native plants, all of the invasive plants. It looks something like this. This is what the front page will look like. This is a comparison, side-by-side comparison of two front pages of our Eurasian water milfoil and northern milfoil plants. You can see that we've included kind of some color coding here, a red banner for the invasive plants and a green banner for the native plants. We have an orange border around the edges that indicates it's the milfoil family section. So we have a couple different plant families that we find in Lake Tahoe. And for easy flipping, if you think you know what the plant is, you can kind of flip to that section. We've color coded it for that purpose. So if you think it's in the milfoil family, you can flip to the orange group. If you think it's in the pondweed family, you can flip to this kind of yellow-green color. And if you think it's in the waterweed family, you can flip to the blue. And then of course on the front, we find it's really helpful to have some big photos for quickly matching as you're flipping through, just doing that kind of basic, does it look like this, yes or no, to kind of narrow it down. And then once you've narrowed it down to a couple options and you're trying to differentiate between the two, you can flip to the backside. You can see that we still have that red and green banner. We still have the orange border, but we focus mostly on key characteristics that can be helpful to identify and differentiate between the two plants or few plants that you might have. We've also found that it's very helpful to offer, from a access standpoint, it's very helpful to offer different levels of involvement. So if people aren't able to attend a full training, I mentioned that we have some digital resources. One of those is this short video. It's literally a minute, 24 seconds, super short, rapid fire. It talks about the program itself, why it's important, and how you can actually report what you're seeing to us. And we ask every participant to report their observations using this digital smartphone app, this free app called Citizen Science Tahoe. It's super easy to use, very straightforward, very user-friendly, and everybody brings their phone everywhere. So it's really smart to have a digital survey platform for us. Very helpful. We also have started distributing some new eisenlight countertop displays that have these. So these go into different businesses around the basin and beyond, actually. And they have examples of the 2 invasive plants that we have, preserved plant samples, as well as 2 native lookalikes. So folks, as they're renting a kayak at the beach, this plant display will be there. They can pick up the test tubes, get a closer look right then and there. They can take a handout that's located in the plant display itself, learn about the program, and there's some key characteristics on that handout as well, that they can take that with them and use it to report their sightings while they're out on their kayak tour. So just really trying to get as many people involved in different levels of involvement. We're not just focusing on our local community here, but we also want to capture the people that are coming to visit Lake Tahoe as well, and educate them about the threats and how they can help even on their short stay. We take all of the data that's reported by our participants, and we put it onto a large map here, which you can see. This is our 2021 map. And it also includes some 2020 data just to kind of fill it out while the season's still early, because the plants are just starting to grow right now. So you can see this is just the lower, we're focused in on the lower region of Lake Tahoe, and you can see that the plants are very concentrated on kind of the southeast area of Lake Tahoe. We've got some symbology here to differentiate. The red diamonds are Eurasian water milfoil. The yellow is curlyleaf pondweed. The orange is where there are sightings of both the 2 invasive plants. And then we do actually ask our volunteers to submit absence data as well. It's very helpful to have absence data so that we know that somebody went to that site recently and didn't see anything. That's very helpful to us. And you'll notice that there's a lot of absence data on top of presence data. That could denote a growing season, which is also helpful to have. It's nice for us to know and keep track of when the plants start growing and stop growing. And as climate change is warming our waters, that growing season may expand. So it's helpful for us to have this data for a myriad of reasons. And this map is available and available to the public at any time. And we're happy to share this data to anybody that can find it useful. And you can find this map on our website at keeptahoeblue.org, as well as the video that I mentioned in the last couple slides. And so do definitely check it out. See if you're familiar with Lake Tahoe, or if you live here, or if you have a vacation home. See if there's anything growing near you, and help us by reporting what you see next time you're in town. And then, of course, we also share this data with our partners in the basin, and maps like this one from the Tahoe Resource Conservation District are created from this data. If there's any infestations that are new, that'll be added to this map, and it'll be slated into the plan for control. And then just some program statistics from 2013 to 2020. Again, 2013 is when the program began. So since the program's creation, we've had 71 formal trainings. We've certified 620 of those volunteers that have attended those trainings. And those volunteers have submitted 1,450 surveys. And I'll kind of jump to a lower statistic here. The very last one is how many surveys we've received on the Citizen Science Tahoe app. 217 of them have been submitted through the app. It's a pretty new platform for us. We've started really using it in the last year or so. And so we expect that to really take off in the coming seasons. Our volunteers have surveyed 209 unique sites around Lake Tahoe shoreline and the surrounding area itself. We've certified 15 marinas, that's public marinas and private marinas, and we've been able to map 11 of those marinas as well for hotspot areas that they should really be focusing on. We're really happy to have the support of our local Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board, who has written Eyes in the Lake into the annual Marina General Permit that is required for all of the California marinas. So each of the marinas are required to attend an Eyes in the Lake training with me each year and submit a marina-wide survey using the map that we've provided for them that just looks something like this, which just outlines different hotspot areas or known infestation areas that they should really be focusing on in addition to their entire marina. And we're thrilled to have this, this requirement expanding to the Nevada side in the next coming year or two through TRPA's Marina Plan. So we'll be able to really get all of the marinas in Lake Tahoe on board with this program. The Eyes in the Lake program has been really integral in conducting volunteer surveys and helping out with this particular restoration project. And so this photo here, for those of you that are familiar with Lake Tahoe might not be able to pinpoint this photo, but this is the Upper Truckee Marsh shown in the photo here. You've got the Tahoe Keys kind of in the background. And the Upper Truckee Marsh is currently being restored through the California Tahoe Conservancy and the Upper Truckee River Working Group partnership. And this restoration project has been in the works for many, many, many years. But an aquatic invasive species survey was not planned to be part of the restoration pre-work. And so the Eyes in the Lake program and volunteers were able to actually contribute their expertise by conducting a volunteer survey from the mouth of the Upper Truckee River, which is our largest tributary into Lake Tahoe, for a couple miles upstream. And so they walked the entire bank upstream looking for aquatic invasive plants. They actually found a couple infestations in the Upper Truckee River, and they were actually able to pinpoint the source of those infestations, which was coming from a nearby storm drain that as boaters were pulling their boat out of the Tahoe Keys Marina, they were taking all of the plants that had gotten caught on their propeller and on their boat trailer off on the street and leaving it on the street, which then got washed into the storm drain, which went straight into the Upper Truckee River and started a new infestation. So the source was found. Steps from various land managers since then have taken place to prevent further infestation in the Upper Truckee River. And now the restoration project is underway with plans to control that infestation and make sure it's not there post-restoration. In addition, there was a volunteer control process incorporated into that. So we had some volunteers doing hand pulls and in addition to their tracking to remove some of these plants. Ultimately found it wasn't super successful. It was very mucky and we found that some fragments were being left behind, which could potentially be contributing to the problem. And so we learned from that it's better to have our volunteers just report what they're seeing. We asked them not to actually pull any plants because of the risk of making it worse. However, since that first survey, we've been able to incorporate surveys into our annual events for Eyes on the Lake and incorporate volunteers into that process. So we've continued our surveys upstream of the Upper Truckee River. You can see it's this blue line on the bottom here. So the first year we went from the lake about to this highway intersection. The second year we went upstream to the next highway intersection, and the third year all the way to the last intersection there where the headwaters are. And we had really a ton of fun doing that. Our volunteers were so excited to be a part of this exciting survey. And we're really happy to say that we didn't find any other infestations along the Upper Truckee River upstream. Last year, we were able to do 2 volunteer surveys. We went to Spooner Lake here on the east shore, small little lake there. We also did not find any aquatic invasive plants there. We found a very large diversity of native plants, which is really great. And then we went to Donner Lake. Donner Lake is a very popular motorized boat recreation destination in the Truckee area, pretty large lake, about 6 miles perimeter. And we did the entire lake with our volunteers and staff and found no invasive plants. We did, however, find Asian clams, but that's been known, unfortunately. And then we're really excited that this year we've received funding from Martis Fund in the Truckee area to bring these surveys to that area and expand into Truckee. So we'll be conducting a series of trainings and surveys throughout the Truckee region, looking at a few different Truckee water bodies and seeing if there's any plants there. Because again, it's so important to know where these plants are growing in order to properly manage and control them. And we definitely don't want to introduce any more into Lake Tahoe, nor into other water bodies that are so popular for recreation. And then some lessons learned here as I finish up. Just if you, this is very helpful for those of you that are wanting to start your own community science program, especially one focused on aquatic invasive or invasive species in general in your region. Any program is going to raise awareness. So if you have trainings or public support at all, any program like this is going to get the word out, and that's what's most important. You'll get that information out to the community. They can help spread the word for you, whether or not they actually end up collecting data. They'll know about it. They'll share with their friends, and they might be a little more cognizant in doing actions that could potentially spread this issue. Creating tiers of involvement is another really important one. We found that not everybody has the time to devote to volunteer efforts, but they still want to help out in one way or another. So finding ways where you can kind of create more or less involved opportunities for folks to get involved is going to ultimately grow your program and the amount of data that you're collecting. Working in some sort of quality assurance, quality control is so important. I haven't talked about this a ton, but we do provide the trainings as an attempt for quality assurance and quality control, the identification guides, and we also ask for every survey that they submit a photo. And the photo is really helpful for me to double check what they're seeing. Sometimes I can even just identify it from the photo. And then of course, these surveys also include an automatic GPS point location. So I can go out, or other staff can go out and try to verify the observation reported. And then integrate into existing efforts. If there's already groups out there or efforts out there that are working towards this goal, collaborate with them. Don't try to duplicate those efforts, but make that effort better in some way or another. And along those lines, partnering with businesses and organizations to get your word out. We've got those countertop displays at a lot of private and public businesses around the basin. And it's been so helpful in capturing new audiences for our group, for our program. And then finally, technology is your friend. We are out of the Stone Ages officially, so embracing different technology. Again, everybody brings their phone with them everywhere, so taking advantage of that to capture data through a phone or through some sort of digital platform is going to be very helpful within your program. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions.
Wow. That is impressive, Emily. That's quite a program. I mean, for those of you who have been to Lake Tahoe, it's a huge area. So it's really impressive that you've been able to not only cover the geographic area, but also engage so many different agencies and entities in helping with the work, including just individuals visiting. So
Right.
that's yeah, that's really something. I had a couple of questions. Just a reminder for folks to put questions in the Q&A, and we'll ask Emily and maybe even type in some answers. But I'm curious. You mentioned so there's that kind of quintessential view of Tahoe where it's just rock and sand and water, perfectly clear.
Mm-hmm.
But then you mentioned there are native plants as well. So what's the balance? Like, how do these non-native plants do something bad that the native plants don't? What's the situation? What kind of biodiversity impacts might there be?
Yeah, That's a really good question. So I didn't get too involved in depth into this, but Lake Tahoe is considered an oligotrophic lake. So it naturally has very low nutrients in the water column. It has a very short growing season for plants. It's very cold. So it doesn't support a ton of plant life in general. And our native plants, while they are present, we find them more often in our streams and tributaries that lead into Lake Tahoe that have kind of a different sediment bottom. So they tend to have more of a muck layer and they tend to be a little shallower. So we don't find a ton of native plants growing in Lake Tahoe, but we do find some. And they do contribute some of the same issues. But because there's not quite as many of them, it's not as widespread of an issue or as bad of an issue. It doesn't contribute too much to the clarity loss, whereas the invasives, just like anywhere, invasives are going to be so well equipped to thrive in an area that they're not normally growing in. And so the invasives we find just really take over so much better than the natives.
Are there impacts to fish or other organisms?
Yeah, actually there's impacts for our warm water fish. They actually prefer these areas where the invasive plants are doing well because the invasive plants contribute to blocking out some of the sunlight, creating warmer water, murkier water, and all of these things are habitat that the warm water fish prefer. So there's actually could potentially be an improvement in decreasing warm water fish populations by removing the invasive plant populations.
Do the warm water fish threaten cold water fish, or what's the?
Yeah, so the warm water fish, they do threaten some of our native minnows that tend to hang out in the shallower areas in the same spots as these warm water fish. So like largemouth bass, they can swallow these minnows whole, and our minnows just don't get very big. So they definitely are competing for resources, habitat, and there's just some competition in general between our native and invasive fish.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah, that helps. I mean, I can certainly viscerally imagine the experience, the user experience, the visitor experience, but I was curious more about the ecology too. Nikki,
Sure.
do you have some questions from the Q&A you want to share?
Yeah, we have some questions and some still coming in. We have a question from Ron. He says he's seen some of these invasive species sold at pet shops and nursery facilities. What is the outreach like to businesses like those?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we think that's probably how potentially one of the ways that these invasive plants were introduced into Lake Tahoe. It could be from boaters. It could have also been from somebody dumping a fish tank because they are a very common aquatic fish tank plant. And as far as I know, there's actually not a ton of research out there to the plant stores, to the local plant stores, to reduce the amount of these plants being sold there. But there is a lot more education and outreach revolving around just not dumping your aquarium plants, fish at all into natural waterways. And I think the bigger kind of lesson learned from that is the goldfish, because that's most likely how those giant goldfish entered our Lake Tahoe, is from dumping a fish tank. And but in addition, just from a plumbing side of things, Lake Tahoe's wastewater does not enter Lake Tahoe. It actually gets pumped out of our watershed into a different area. So there's not as much of a risk of, if you flush a fish or aquarium down a toilet, of it entering Lake Tahoe. It would have to be that somebody actually went out to the lake or to a tributary and dumped it directly in there.
Those of you may have heard of the Plant Right Partnership, where Calypsy works with the nursery trade on helping to raise awareness about plants that can be problematic. The pet trade also has some partnerships. I think Habitatitude was it may still be active as a partnership where those in the pet trade retail business try to raise awareness about the potential impacts of some of the plants and animals that are used. But it is a challenging situation. You can't just say, oh, anything that's a problem, outlaw it, because a lot of these things have, a lot of these organisms have strong constituencies. Go ahead, Nikki.
All right, and we got another question from Nina. She says, what were you using before the app to collect the survey information?
We were using paper. Well, back in the day when the program first started, we were using paper and we were asking volunteers. We provided them a notebook as well as digital or paper data sheets. And we asked them to track what they were seeing just on paper and then to mail it in to us. And as we started entering into the 21st century, we started using different survey platforms. And so we've actually started with an ArcGIS GeoForm was our original digital platform until we started partnering with UC Davis Turk on the Citizen Science Tahoe app a couple of years ago. And so we've kind of pivoted mostly to using the Citizen Science Tahoe app. And if you've never used the app, it's not just a place to submit your eyes on the lake observations or plant observations. You can submit a ton of other citizen science observations, including water quality, algae, litter. You can even do snowflake sightings and rain or snow sightings in the winter time. And it's a really great one-stop shop for submitting Tahoe observations.
All right, and Linda wants to know, what's the concern with clams and mussels?
Good question. So clams, Asian clams, we do have in Lake Tahoe, and they are just another invasive species that we don't want in Lake Tahoe. And they particularly have a pretty big impact on lake clarity. So clams are filter feeders. They pull nutrients out of the water. And as I mentioned before, Lake Tahoe has very low nutrients in general, just naturally. So these clams are actually pulling nutrients out of the water as much as they can possibly find. And then they poop out a little package of nutrients, of waste nutrients that then causes an algal bloom. So it's kind of a concentrated little package of food for algae to grow. And I think in that earlier slide I had, you could see the kind of algae bloom right on top of the clams. And that's something we see hand in hand with clam beds that we don't normally see in other parts of the lake. And not only can it decrease clarity, the algae particles floating through the water can actually kind of turn it a green color, which we don't want in addition. And then the quagga and zebra mussels, if you're not familiar with those, they're just very devastating to water and lakes and other recreation in general. They are really sharp shells, so it can be really painful to walk on. They clog waterways, and we do pull water for drinking water out of Lake Tahoe, and they could potentially clog the pipes used to pull that water out and cost us a lot of money and time each year to maintain that. And they're just very devastating. Check out like Lake Havasu and quagga mussels for some information there on what's been happening there.
All right, and Monica wanted to know, are you noticing more pond scum and algae due to the higher temperatures we've been having?
That's a great question. And personally, and I think anecdotally, a lot of people are noticing more algae and slippery rocks and things like that in the last couple of years. But where there's actually a few groups that are trying to figure out if it is actually increasing or if it's an anecdotal increase, that people are just starting to notice it more because there's more awareness around it and there's more education surrounding it. So they're actually taking note. But we do expect to see more algae on the rocks and in the near shore as the lake level decreases. We're in another drought cycle. We're seeing a lot lower water levels already. And so those near shore areas are just more shallow. They're more warm. It's perfect habitat for algae to grow and thrive.
All right,
you can
thanks.
report that. You can report that on the Citizen Science Tahoe app.
Thanks, that's all the questions we have.
Perfect.
Excellent, thank you, Nikki. Well, I have seen some comments in the chat about the utility of this as an example for other citizen science or community science, as we tend to say, programs. Yours is huge, so others, can take what they can at their scale. And I think that's the fact, kind of the combination of the technical capacity of smartphone apps that, you could develop something for your purpose, combined with the increased interest in community science and people contributing to protecting the places they love, is really a great opportunity for increasing the workforce, the pseudo workforce of people out there doing especially the detection part of early detection, rapid response. So there's a lot. We typically talk about boots on the ground, eyes and ears on the ground. In your case, it's on the water.
Yeah.
But that is a huge, that could be a game changer for us, the community at large, finding out early about new infestations.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely. And happy to answer any questions or look at any new program proposals at a closer look. If you want to email me, we can chat about what's happening in your area specifically.
that sounds great. So yeah, you can find Emily's contact information on the Keep Tahoe Blue /save League to Save Lake Tahoe website. And remember that we have 2 more of these lunchtime talks. Tomorrow we're talking about tree pests, and on Friday we have the invasive Spartina project from protecting San Francisco Bay. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. Hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow. And if not, I think Claire just pasted in the chat the link to a survey form, which University of California will be using to kind of gauge the success of these webinars. So if you have a chance to go fill that out, that'd be great. I think the way they designed it is such that you take it once, even if you attend multiple days. So if you're just attending today, go ahead and fill it out. If you think you're going to be here tomorrow or Friday, you can wait until after that one to fill it out. All right. Any last words, Emily?
I did just see Ron asked another question, and I typed an answer to him, but I thought I'd share. He asked if there was any native carnivorous plants in the Tahoe area, and there is. It's actually my favorite aquatic carnivorous plant, which is called common bladderwort. And I wish I would have included. I have a great little video of it actually sucking in a small little water bug. But common bladderwort, it's a very common aquatic plant across the entire United States. It can grow in a lot of different areas, and we do see it in Lake Tahoe.
And it eats bugs.
It eats little water bugs and worms and things. Yeah, it has like a little. So the bladders actually pull in water bugs and digest it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's great. What a question.
Yep.
That's a good place to end our invasive lunch webinar. All right. Well, thank you to Emily for your great presentation, and thank you to all our participants for attending today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Take care.